Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through just a couple different loads for my 22 Creedmoor. I've fired roughly about 150 rounds down my barrel. I've got a Bartling barrel and an impact action for my 22 Creedmoor. Mostly shot Hornady ammunition. Originally I started coyote hunting with the ELD-Ms, and the only reason I went with the ELD-Ms is one of the owners in a video from Horizon Firearms, the guys that ultimately designed the 22 Creedmoor cartridge. He made mention that he preferred to use that. I read a lot of good reviews. A lot of guys actually use the 75 gram ELD-Ms for coyote hunting. I've posted some polls on some Facebook groups to see, but wanted to try a couple different loads for you guys. The other box ammunition that I've shot is the V-Match. I've had with both the V-Match and the ELD-M, I've had phenomenal results, and then I've also had mixed results, and it all comes down to shot placement on these coyotes, and you guys understand that. So in this video, what I'll be doing is I'm going to run you guys through some of the load data. I'm also going to share with you guys some footage with the ELD-VT. I don't have footage for the BlitzKings quite yet, but at a later date I'll post that in a reel for you guys. So just make sure to like and subscribe so you guys can track that information. As you know, on YouTube it helps me, so I'll continue posting and sharing more content. And then furthermore, I'll obviously run you guys through just a range day just to see some of the results that we get on some of the groupings with this. So without further ado, let's run through just real quick as far as the bullets that I'm using. So as mentioned, I've heard really good reviews, online from what I've been seeing. I've run polls on Facebook groups just on bullets that guys are using. The only thing that I found is reloading the 22 Creedmoor. It's just like manufacturer specific data is lacking in some areas. Like if I go to Sierra's website, I try to find information on Varget. It's not really giving me the high and low of it, so I did kind of have to search around online to see what type of results guys were using in order to make a safe load. I mean, at the end of the day, I want to be really fast and really accurate. But this is a varmint bullet, and then the Hornady ELD-VT. I've liked these. I shot at box ammo. When I shot at box ammo, I chronographed it. I was getting great speeds out of it. I threw that data in my thermal, took it out to range, and my holdover for 370 yards was virtually nothing. It was pretty damn close. It's a really flat shooting bullet, and very efficient in its design with its it's longer bullet designed, and it has a longer boat tail than the Sierra VarmintKing. But then I'll run that video in here, but then there's the boat tail comparison, so you can see it's quite a difference. And then just the overall length of these two bullets, it's noticeably different. But even I took that bullet out to 470 yards and had relatively good feedback. So as far as I mentioned Varget earlier, so I'm not really trying out different powders. I have a bunch. I've got H4350. I've got Varget, I figured Varget would be just a good choice. I live in Wisconsin, so I'm looking for something that's temperature stable. So I'm gonna be choosing that. As far as the different amounts of powders, going from left to right, I started at 38.5, and typically I like to go in 0.3 increments when I do a load development. I like to do 0.3 increments. I like to do five round groups of 5 shot strings, and I wait about at least 5 minutes between shots just for the barrel to cool down. But for this one, because I was testing out 2 bullets, I didn't want to, go through and shoot, 50 bullets right away. So, especially the barrel life of this caliber. So I go from 38.5 to 39 grains, and then from 39, I go to 39.3. For primers, I'm using the CCI 200 large rifle primers. And then I want to talk about the brass and some of the prep work that I'm doing. because this has been a big change for my reloading process in the last month here, and I'm hoping I should see better results from it. So I've got Lepura brass, I've got Peterson brass. Heck, I even use I even use Starline brass for hunting with my 6-side Creedmoor. I've been collecting all the Hornady brass, and I just decided I'm going to use the Hornady brass. Once Starline comes out with a 22 Creedmoor casing, I'll use that. Yep, I understand I can neck down the 6-side Creedmoor. I'm not going to go through that trouble or anything like that. So for prep work, you guys can kind of see it up in this corner right here, but I've got a burst fire annealer. So I always begin with doing like a full size length die on my brass, pop out the primer, I'll clean it. After I clean it, I run it through the annealer. After I anneal it, then what I'll do is I'll run it through a 21st century black nitride expander mandrel. From there, that's typically when I'll trim the brass. So trimming brass, I just did the brass down to 1.920 inches. Loaded the powder, and then for both loads, my overall length for the cartridge is 2.52 inches. Recently got the Redding premium die set, and I love it. I've got RCBS, I've got Hornady dies. I don't got any of the short action customs or any of those fancy dies, and I know those can make a big difference. I'm not going to be spending $300 on a die. I've gotten relatively pretty good results just with the lower end dies. Yeah, I'm just getting into PRS, so maybe I'll consider that once I maybe move over to 6- or something like that for hunting purposes though. Whether it's box ammo or just reloads, these dies are working just fine. So I'll run through just a few different videos for you guys on some kills that I got with the ELD-VTs out of the box ammo. I'll run it on the screen just on some data points for you guys, but without further ado, I'm going to get to the range and see how these group. I'm going to finish loading my last bullet here. We'll see how these group, and then we'll do an after range report. So wish me luck, guys. at 470 yards. We got a good amount of crosswind. On the left edge. No problem. All right, starting off with 38.5 grains of Varget on the 69 grain Sierra BlitzKing. $33.63, $33.56, $33.42, $33.29, $33.39. Looking at an average at 33.46, a standard deviation of 12, and an extreme spread of 33.6. All right, 39 grains of Varget, 69 grain Sierra BlitzKing. $33.99, $34.01. Hold that one a little bit. $33.63 would add up for so far off. $33.95, $33.76. An average at 33.87, standard deviation of 15, extreme spread of 38. All right, 39.3 grains of Varget, 69 grain Sierra BlitzKing. $34.23, $34.19, $33.84, $33.92, $33.91. An average of 34.02, standard deviation of 16, and extreme spread of 39. 38.5 grains of Varget, 69 grain ELD-VT. So, 33.53, 33.17, 33.39. An average of 33.36, standard deviation of 13, and extreme spread of 36. 39 grains of Varget, 69 grain ELD-VT. $33.80. $33.60. $33.39. $33.92. $33.24. An average of 33.59, standard deviation of 25, an extreme spread of 68.6. 39.3 grains Varget, 69 grain ELD-VT. $33.96. $33.60. $33.71. $34.05. $33.73. an average of 3381.6, a standard deviation of 16.6, and an extreme spread of 44.5. All right, and there you guys have it. This is by no means a comprehensive review, between the ELD-VT versus the Sierra BlitzKing. And I understand that there's all sorts of different powder types and different weights to use. Furthermore, one thing worth mentioning is both of these bullets were seated at the same depth, and after I did this, I found a box of Hornady V-Match, the 69 grain ELD-VT, and I did measure that, and I was actually 4/100ths of an inch seated deeper than the box ammunition. So I certainly will put that into my consideration just when I start using the ELD-VT. At least with the Sierra BlitzKing, the 39 grains of Varget generally shot well. Looking at 15 for a standard deviation, which is plenty good enough for hunting coyotes. I would have liked to see better standard deviations. However, I understand that I'm using Hornady brass, which can have an effect on that, as well as just using different types of powders. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to follow me, because I will be hunting with the BlitzKing. I want to see some of the effects that it has on varmint, and I will be sharing that in my reels in the near future. At least for the ELD-VT. For the box ammo, I've generally had pretty good effects, and it all comes down to shot placement. I understand that. The footage that I shared with you guys, where I had some runners, that's purely down to shot placement, which is definitely a fair point. But without further ado, I'm going to close it out. Here's the data on the screen for you guys, and I'm looking forward to sharing more with you. Thanks.